Hello friends, welcome to Tilted Planet. You are watching episode 4. My name is Sangeeta and today I am going to talk about conflict in the Middle East. They say history repeats itself. They also say life is a circle. I tend to agree with those who think life is a spiral. We never really come back to the exact same point in the history. When we see similarities, it is because we are comparing this point with this point or this point with this point, and there is always this delta here, right? Sometimes we say that, oh, the history is repeating itself, except now the tables have turned. At that time, we are comparing this point with this point. Could we then turn the pages of our history books to find solutions to the current and future problems? Let's look at what is known as the Great Game. Again, a complete misrepresentation of what it really was. So I have renamed it already 19th Century Anglo-Russian Cold War, 19th CARCW. I'm going to call it CARCW. As a result of 19th CARCW, Russia captured Central Asia. But it wasn't even about Central Asia. It wasn't even the goal. Russia had two primary goals. One was to snatch India from the British. Second, engage the British away from the Russian borders, which is relocation and outsourcing of the conflict. Now, the entire Central Asia just happened to be in the way, and it was a side effect or it was a bonus that Russia got to capture the Central Asia. So let us now compare that time of the 19th century Central Asia with the current Middle East. At the time it was the conquest of India. Now it is for the oil. Nothing to do with the people or the land really. It's just in the way of whatever resource that Western Empire is trying to reach. Who is fighting? Western countries. Next item, affected states didn't unite. Important point. It's common. Empires captured land or puppet governments were installed. Both cases. Relocation of conflict and outsourcing of war. Both cases. In Middle East, major European conflict relocated with Israel. Okay. Now, I have nothing against anyone. I'm just telling the fact. My goal is peace for everybody. I'm not against the West. I'm not against the East. Not against Israel. Not against Palestinian. Just trying to analyze the problem so that we can find the solution. So what was the solution? Disintegration of USSR here and here. We don't know yet. I'm going to propose in my next episodes. Now this is a cartoon from November 1878. Punch, the contemporary cartoon at that time, depicting the pressure applied to Abdul Rahman, the Emir of Afghanistan, by his two superpower neighbors. Now we need to understand that Afghanistan as well as Iran have been in this state perpetually since. Is it then a surprise that the September 11th attacks were orchestrated from Afghanistan? And in this episode, I am going to continue to talk about the conflict in the Middle East. I want to begin by acknowledging the fact that conflicts are nothing new to this region. There have been conflicts within and with the outsiders, and what we see on the spiral of life right now is a tables-turned situation. Before the European empires from the Middle East have dominated much of Europe, part of Africa and Asia. So what will stop this spiral of conflicts? What will bring peace? Now, in order to find a solution to a conflict, the fundamental question to ask is, who is fighting with whom? And you would think it would be really easy to know, particularly if it is an ongoing conflict of our time. But surprisingly, it is not. And the reason for that is within that conflict, that there are declared conflicts and there are undeclared conflicts. So we will not know about who is fighting with whom until much later, when all the documents are declassified. It could take this whole century for that. And that's why I have advocated before, and I'm advocating now, that in the future we should look back at the conflicts and rename them when we have a complete grasp of who is fighting with whom. So who will bring peace to this region? In spite of all its efforts, America will not bring peace to the region, nor will Russia, nor will any of the other NATO countries. And that's because simply these are their conflicts that they have relocated and they are outsourcing. They are getting the oil, they are selling weapons to the same countries, and they get to drop the bombs and test their technologies. So it is a win-win-win situation for the countries that are actually fighting, and therefore they will not bring peace to this region. Any civilian militia uprising will not succeed. It hasn't succeeded simply because the sheer military power actually fighting powers have. Terrorist activities like flying planes into tall buildings or bombing airports or bombing train stations will not work, and that is just playing into the hands of the powers, superpowers, who want to malign the image of the people of this region. Any existing ruler will not bring peace to the region because they have bitter conflicts within regimes. It's hard for them to cooperate simply because many of them are just the puppets. Some of them have profit sharing arrangements with the Western oil companies, and so they are so tightly interwoven with the Western empires that they are toothless against those Western empires. Now the conflict may fizzle out somewhat because of the sources of alternative energy, changing demographics in America. America shifts its priorities, just no longer interested in fighting. That sort of thing could happen to ease out the conflict, but Russia will still be there. So is there a solution? Oh yes, there is a solution. It is well hidden in the spirals of the history, and it's not too far either. All we have to do is open the history books and see there has been a successful solution that has been tried and tested. And you are watching episode 6. In this episode, I am going to look in the past for a peaceful future of the Middle East. So let's first analyze the current situation in the Middle East. Region divided in princely states. People connected by a common culture but divided along the sectarian lines. Empirical powers are taking advantage of these divisions. Princely states subdued by the empirical powers. So let's take our scanner and go around the globe to see what looks like this in the past. And we don't actually have to go that far. This looks a lot like the 18th or the 19th century India. So what was the solution in India? India's non-violent struggle for independence. Aspects of India's peaceful non-violent independence struggle that are relevant here. Number 1, it was a people's movement. Number 2, a peaceful and secular movement against an all-powerful adversary. This was a key to the unity of the region. Number 3, simultaneous social reforms. And number 4, I have here the Quit India call for the British. That was after decades of negotiations for self-rule and more autonomy for the region. All those negotiations failed, and Gandhi finally just gave one final call: quit India. Now what's happening in the Middle East now? The people from the region are quitting, unfortunately, and becoming refugees elsewhere. Instead of that, they need to come back and revive the Arab Spring into Arab Spring 2, which is based on these principles. Okay, so recommending Arab Spring 2 based on India's non-violent struggle for independence. Why do I think it will work? So in addition to the similarities I pointed out earlier, Satyagraha, the force of truth, is an invention by Mahatma Gandhi that has been successfully used repeatedly in many different scenarios. Now the next question, it will work, but is it necessary? Most importantly, merely absence of war is not peace. The region is currently being used as a battleground between the empirical powers, Russia and the NATO countries. Someday that battleground will shift, and that will bring a vacuum which could bring an anarchy, which we have already seen in the region, but also in Afghanistan after Russia was defeated and America left. Now compare that to India. Many argue that the India's freedom movement didn't actually bring the freedom. They cite other reasons why the British left. Let's assume that they are right for a second. The British would have handed the power back to the princely states, and the fate of those states could not have been much different than today's Afghanistan and Pakistan. So can this happen in the Middle East? For all we know, it might already be happening. The next Gandhis of the Middle East, they may be in the posh towers of Dubai, or they may be living in the refugee camps somewhere, or they may be living somewhere in the Western countries. So much depends upon whether or not the people of this region can overcome their identity myopias to unite. Do you know any such efforts already underway? If you do, please comment below and tell us about it.